The night was colder than anything Lyra had felt in months. Sharp winds blew across the small trade outpost, carrying grains of sand that scratched against every wall and every closed window. Most people hurried indoors before the storm could grow stronger. Lights in shops slowly turned off one by one, and only the faint glow of distant security lamps remained. In the middle of this cold darkness, Lyra moved quietly along the edge of the buildings. She held her small child tight against her chest, wrapping them both in her thin cloak. The cloak was old and ripped in some places, and she had mended it with any scraps she found during her travels. But tonight the cold pushed through it easily, making her arms shake with fear that her child might not survive another hour. Lyra had not eaten for 2 days. Her child had eaten only a single fruit she found yesterday, and she gave the whole thing to the child without taking a bite herself. She had been living like this for months, ever since raiders destroyed her colony and left her people scattered across different planets. Some were taken by strangers, some were lost in the chaos, and many, like her, wandered from place to place, with nowhere to go. She was not looking for comfort anymore. She was simply trying to stay alive. But tonight, she knew her strength was fading. She needed food. She needed warmth. She needed something, anything that could help her child make it through the night. She moved between buildings, keeping to the shadows because she didn't want trouble. Some humans in this outpost did not like aliens. They said aliens brought problems. They said aliens were untrustworthy. Lyra had heard whispers and seen the way some people stared at her whenever she passed through a market. So she learned to travel at night, hiding herself as much as she could. She had only one thought in her mind: find something to feed her child. Just one small thing. Even a leftover piece of bread would be enough. She would risk anything for that. On the other side of the outpost, a human man named Jace had just finished repairing a broken engine inside his shop. His shop was small but full of tools, spare metal pieces, and half-fixed machines. Jace liked quiet nights because they helped him concentrate on his work. He was a simple man who fixed things for a living and tried not to get involved in other people's lives. But he wasn't cold-hearted. He respected travelers from every planet, and he believed anyone who struggled deserved kindness. He had seen refugees pass through before, but none had stayed long. As he stepped outside to lock up the shop, he heard a faint sound, almost too soft to notice. It was like a small cry or a whimper. He frowned and looked around. The night was quiet, except for the wind, but he felt something was wrong. He walked toward the narrow alley beside his shop. At first he thought it was only shadows moving with the wind. But then he noticed someone crouched low behind a crate. He stepped forward slowly, not wanting to frighten whoever it was. When his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he saw her. A thin alien woman, holding a small child close to her chest. Her eyes, faintly glowing with her natural color, looked up at him in fear. She looked tired, weak, and ready to collapse. He moved closer, trying to understand the situation. Lyra panicked. She didn't want a human to see her. She had no strength left to run. But she still tried. She stood up quickly, and almost lost her balance. Her knees shook, and she felt the world tilt. The child in her arms whimpered, sensing her fear. She tried to take a step back, but her legs failed, and she slipped. Before she could fall onto the rough ground, Jace reached out and caught her gently. She gasped in surprise, her heart racing. Her arms tightened protectively around her child. She begged him softly not to hurt them. Her voice shook so much she could barely form words. She explained in broken phrases that she only came out to find food for her child. She said she would leave immediately, and she didn't want to cause trouble. Jace stood there, holding her steady, feeling her trembling with both fear and cold. His eyes softened when he saw the small face of the child hidden under the cloak. The child looked exhausted, too tired to even lift their head. In that moment, he understood everything he needed to understand. She wasn't dangerous. She wasn't here to steal. She was simply a mother, trying to keep her child alive. He spoke gently, telling her she didn't have to run. He told her he wouldn't hurt them, Lyra looked confused. No one had spoken kindly to her in a long time. She lowered her eyes, unsure whether she should trust him. But the wind blew again, sending a freezing gust across her back, and her child whimpered softly. She felt helpless. Jace opened the door to his shop and stepped aside, showing her the warm light inside. He told her to come in so her child wouldn't freeze. Lyra hesitated for several long seconds. Her body wanted warmth, but her mind feared traps. But when her child leaned weakly against her, she made her choice. She moved slowly into the shop. The warmth of the workshop felt strange to her. She had spent so many nights in cold, empty places that she forgot what comfort felt like. Jace closed the door behind them, not to trap her, but to block the cold wind. He walked to the small kitchen area at the back and returned with a bowl of warm food. He placed it on the table near her and stepped back so she wouldn't feel pressured. Lyra stared at the food as if she couldn't believe it was real. Her hands trembled when she picked up the bowl. She gently fed her child first, watching the little one eat slowly. Tears filled her eyes, but she wiped them quickly, afraid the human might think she was weak. When she finally took a small bite for herself, she felt warmth spread inside her stomach. It was the first real meal she had eaten in days. Jace sat across the room, giving her space. He didn't ask questions right away because he could see she was frightened and exhausted. He waited until she finished eating before speaking again. He asked her name gently. She answered softly, telling him her name was Lyra, and her child's name was Rin. She told him they had been wandering since their colony was destroyed. She said she didn't expect kindness from anyone, especially not from a human. Jace shook his head and said she had done nothing wrong. He said she didn't deserve to suffer like this. Lyra's eyes softened, but she still looked uncertain. She told him she didn't want to stay long. She said she only needed one night to rest, and she would leave before dawn to avoid bringing trouble to his shop. Jace looked at her tired face and the small child sleeping in her arms. He didn't want her to walk back into the freezing night. He told her she could sleep inside the workshop, where it was warm and safe. She stared at him, shocked by the offer. She wasn't used to kindness without a hidden reason. She asked him why he was helping her. He simply said that no one should freeze outside, especially not a mother and child. Lyra felt her heart shake. She slowly nodded and agreed to stay just for the night. Jace set up a small sleeping area with blankets and a soft mat. Lyra lay down carefully, keeping her child close. Rin curled against her chest and fell asleep almost immediately. Lyra watched the child's peaceful breathing, something she hadn't seen in weeks. She slowly relaxed, letting her eyes close. But she still felt a strange mix of fear and comfort. Across the room, Jace sat at his workbench, pretending to fix something while he kept a quiet watch over them. He didn't know why he felt so protective so suddenly, but he did. Maybe it was the child's tired face. Maybe it was the way Lyra tried so hard to stay strong even though she was barely standing. Maybe it was because he had spent so many nights alone that seeing someone so vulnerable touched something inside him. He told himself they would only stay for the night. But deep down, he already knew he wouldn't let them walk back into danger in the morning. Something inside him had changed. He didn't know it yet, but helping them tonight would become the beginning of a story he never expected. Lyra fell asleep slowly, still unsure of the future, still scared of what morning might bring. But for the first time, in a very long time, she slept in a place where no one was chasing her. No one was yelling. No one was trying to take her child away. She felt safe just a little, but it was enough to let her breathe. And as she drifted into sleep, Jace whispered quietly, almost to himself, that he would watch over them for the night. He didn't know then that this single night would change all three of their lives forever. Lyra woke before sunrise, her eyes slowly adjusting to the soft light inside the workshop. For a few seconds she didn't remember where she was. Her heart jumped with fear, thinking she had fallen asleep outside and put her child in danger. But then she saw the clean floor, the warm glow from a small heater, and the tools hanging neatly on the walls. She felt the steady breathing of her child resting safely in her arms. Everything slowly came back to her, the human, the workshop, the food, and the quiet kindness she didn't expect. Rin slept deeply. Maybe for the first time in many weeks, Lyra touched the child's forehead gently, feeling warmth instead of the cold that usually scared her every night. She sat up quietly, trying not to disturb the child. Her back ached from months of sleeping on rough ground, but the small bed Jace prepared felt almost soft to her body. She wrapped her child a little tighter in the cloak and stood. She didn't want to stay too long. She believed she had already taken more kindness than she deserved. She looked around for Jace, expecting him to be angry that she and her child were still inside his workshop. Instead, she found him already awake. He was sitting at his workbench, quietly tightening screws on a small machine. His face had shadows under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept much. When he noticed Lyra was awake, he offered a small, friendly smile, not the kind of smile that demanded anything or threatened her, but a calm one that showed he was not bothered by her presence. He greeted her gently and asked if she rested well. Lyra felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment. She nodded but didn't know how to explain the mix of fear and gratitude she felt. Her voice was still weak, but she thanked him again for saving her child's life. She said she would leave right away, before anyone saw her and caused trouble for him. She tried to sound strong, but the worry in her voice was clear. Jace shook his head firmly but kindly. He told her there was no need to rush. He said the sun wasn't even up yet, and the streets were still too cold. He reminded her that her child needed warmth, food, and rest. He said she was welcome to stay until she regained some strength. Lyra froze, unsure how to respond. She wasn't used to anyone caring about her needs. When she remained silent, Jace walked toward the kitchen and returned with warm tea and a little bowl of soft food for Rin. Lyra hesitated, then accepted it with both hands. She sat down carefully and fed her child while Jace returned to his workbench, giving her space. The child ate slowly but seemed stronger than the night before. Lyra felt tears again but blinked them away, trying to stay calm. When Rin finished eating, Lyra covered the child and stood again. She walked toward the door with a determined look. She didn't want Jace to lose customers or face trouble because of her. She had heard people talk badly about aliens in some outposts. She had seen guards push others away just because they looked different. She didn't want that to happen here. She whispered that she should go before anyone noticed. Jace stepped forward, confused. He asked why she was leaving so suddenly when she had nowhere safe to go. She lowered her eyes and told him the truth. She said she didn't want him to face insults or danger because of her and her child. She said she had seen how some humans treated refugees like her. She said she had lived enough nights with fear and she didn't want to bring fear into his life too. Jace listened carefully. He didn't interrupt. When she finished, he took a slow breath and told her she was wrong about one thing. He wasn't afraid of whispers or angry looks. He didn't care about people who judged without understanding. He said what mattered was doing what was right. And in his eyes, leaving her outside in the cold when she clearly needed help was wrong. He told her she was welcome to stay longer, not just one night, but as long as she needed to get back on her feet. His voice was steady, and his eyes were calm. Lyra felt her throat tighten again. She held Rin a little closer, and whispered that she didn't want to be a burden. Jace shook his head and said she wasn't a burden. He said she had already helped just by being here because the shop felt less lonely with someone inside it. Lyra didn't know how to respond to that. She didn't expect a human to value her presence. She finally nodded slowly, allowing herself to stay, but she told him she wanted to help in return. Over the next few days, she kept her promise. Though she was still weak, she worked as much as she could. She cleaned areas of the shop that Jace never had time to organize. She sorted tools, polished equipment, and helped Jace carry small items. She moved with quiet grace, careful not to disturb anything. Her child stayed by her side, or watched Jace with curiosity as he worked. Lyra felt useful for the first time since her colony fell. It made her heart feel lighter. Jace noticed how Rin watched him work. One afternoon, he picked up a small tool and showed the child how it moved. Rin reached out to touch it with wide eyes. Lyra watched from the corner, surprised that her child smiled so easily with him. She had never seen Rin so relaxed around a stranger. Jace explained the names of different tools, in simple words the child could understand. It became a little daily routine, one that brought warmth into the workshop. But outside the workshop, the outpost wasn't peaceful. Not everyone approved of Lyra staying in a human shop. Some people whispered when she walked by to buy supplies. Others stared openly, their eyes filled with distrust or dislike. Lyra felt those stares like sharp needles in her skin. She kept her head down and finished her tasks quickly, returning to the workshop as fast as possible. One afternoon, while Jace was fixing a large engine, she overheard voices outside. Two rough-looking workers stood near the shop, speaking loudly on purpose. They said Jace was foolish for letting an alien woman stay in his workplace. They said aliens like her were dangerous. They warned him that he might lose customers. Their voices carried anger and misunderstanding. Lyra froze, feeling her stomach twist painfully. She didn't want this. She didn't want Jace to be punished for helping her. Jace stepped outside to face them. His jaw was tight, his eyes serious. He didn't yell or push them. He simply told them to mind their own business. He said no one had the right to decide who he helped. He told them they were wrong about Lyra. She wasn't dangerous. She was simply trying to protect her child. The workers didn't like his response. They muttered threats and insults before leaving. Lyra felt guilt flood her entire body. She wanted to cry, but she held it in. When Jace returned inside, she hurried to the sleeping area, packed her few belongings, and gently woke Rin. She planned to leave quietly. She didn't want him to lose peace because of her. Jace noticed her movements and rushed over. He asked why she was packing. Lyra kept her eyes down and said she couldn't stay. She said she didn't want him to lose friends, customers, or safety because of her. Her voice shook, but she kept going. She told him she had already received more kindness than she expected, and she couldn't allow him to suffer because of her presence. Jace stepped in front of her and gently took the bundle of belongings from her hands. He told her she wasn't leaving. His voice was firm but calm. He said he wasn't afraid of losing people who judged others unfairly. He said his shop was his own, and he decided who stayed inside it. He reminded her how she had brought life into the quiet workshop. He reminded her how Rin now smiled, something that warmed even his own heart. He said those things mattered more than the opinions of strangers. Lyra's eyes filled with tears. She couldn't stop this time. She held Rin close and whispered that she never wanted to cause harm. Jace assured her she hadn't. He told her again, slowly and clearly, that she belonged here, that she and Rin were safe, that she didn't have to run anymore. Those words changed something inside her. She didn't trust easily, but Jace's voice made her want to believe him. For the first time since her home was destroyed, she felt the faint beginning of something she once knew: hope. It was small, fragile, but it was real. She stayed. Over the next week, Lyra grew stronger. She cleaned the shop, washed tools, helped organize parts, and even assisted Jace with simple repairs. Rin followed Jace everywhere, asking soft questions that made Jace smile. Lyra watched them with quiet warmth. She didn't know what the future held, but for once, she didn't fear tomorrow. But far outside the outpost, beyond the hills and broken mines, something dangerous was moving. Raiders, the same group that had destroyed Lyra's colony, had been spotted again. They were closer than anyone realized. Lyra didn't know it yet, but the piece she finally found was about to be tested in a way she could never imagine. The quiet days in the workshop slowly became a gentle routine that felt almost like a real life to Lyra. She woke early each morning, warmed food for Rin, helped Jace clean the front of the shop, and organized tools while he worked on machines. Rin watched everything with big, curious eyes, smiling more each day. Jace found himself listening for those small footsteps and soft laughs. They brought a warmth to the workshop that had been missing for years. Lyra started to feel something she had forgotten existed: safety. It was a small feeling at first, like a soft light that barely touched her thoughts. But every time she saw Rin smile, every time she saw Jace act with calm kindness, that light grew a little brighter. She still had fears, deep ones that lived inside her since her colony fell, but here, within these walls, she felt those fears soften. But while peace lived inside the workshop, Trouble was growing outside the outpost. Whispers spread through the market. Travelers spoke about raiders seen near the old mines. Some said the raiders were the same ones who destroyed colonies months ago. When Lyra heard those words, her heart squeezed with fear. Because she knew exactly which raiders they meant. She recognized their symbols. She remembered their voices. She remembered running through fire and smoke holding her child with trembling arms. She remembered the sound of explosions destroying everything she loved. She hoped the outpost was strong enough to keep them away. She hoped they were only passing through. But deep down, she feared they were looking for survivors. Her people had been hunted before. She didn't want to believe they would come again, but she couldn't forget the danger. One evening, when Jace closed the workshop early, he noticed Lyra standing near the window, staring at the dark road outside with a sad, distant expression. He walked to her and asked gently if she was worried. Lyra hesitated, but she realized she trusted him enough to speak the truth. She told him about the raiders. She told him they were the ones who attacked her home. She told him she feared they were getting close again. Jace listened without interrupting. He didn't ask for details because he didn't want to hurt her by making her relive painful memories. He simply placed a hand near hers. Not touching, but close enough to show support. He promised her that he wouldn't let anything happen to her or Rin. His voice was steady, strong, the kind that felt like a shield. Lyra looked at him with quiet gratitude, but fear still sat in her heart. She didn't want him to protect her. She didn't want him to risk his life. She just wanted her child to be safe. The next few days were tense. Jace heard more news from customers. Security drones flew lower than usual, scanning every road. The outpost guards moved in pairs. People whispered to each other with worried faces. Rin sensed the tension and clung more often to Lyra's cloak. Lyra kept her child close and tried to hide her growing fear. On the fourth night, everything changed. Jace was working late on a large engine repair when alarms suddenly echoed across the entire outpost. A loud, metallic voice boomed through the speakers, warning everyone to stay inside and lock all doors. Lyra froze. Rin hid behind her legs. Jace quickly put down his tools and ran to the front door. He saw guards rushing across the streets. A glowing red symbol flashed on the alarm screen. Raiders had entered the outpost. Jace's jaw tightened. He immediately locked the shop door and ran back to Lyra. She held Rin tightly, her hands shaking. She knew these raiders. She had heard their voices in her nightmares. She could almost hear the screams from her past mixing with the alarms around her. She whispered Rin's name and hugged the child close, wishing she could hide them both from the world. Jace quickly led them to the back of the shop. Behind a tall shelf was a hidden storage room he had built himself. The room was small, filled with tools and supplies, but it had a strong metal door and a false wall panel only he knew how to open. He shoved aside the shelf and pressed a button, revealing the space. He told Lyra to hide inside immediately. Lyra didn't want to leave him outside. She begged him to come with them, her voice breaking with fear. But Jace shook his head. He said someone had to stand in the front of the shop. If the raiders found no resistance, they might search deeper. If he stood there, they might be delayed. He didn't say the rest. But Lyra understood. He wanted to protect them with his own body. Her heart twisted painfully. She didn't want to lose the only safe person she had met. But she also knew the raiders would kill her if they saw her face. She hugged Jace's arm quickly. Something she had never done before. Then rushed into the hidden room with Rin. Jace watched the panel slide shut, sealing them inside. As soon as it closed, he grabbed one of his modified tools, a device he had made for breaking metal, which could release a strong electric pulse. He took a deep breath and moved to the front of the shop. The door burst open seconds later. 3 raiders stormed inside with heavy boots and dark armor marked with the exact symbol Lyra described. They looked around the workshop, their eyes full of greed and cruelty. They demanded supplies and weapons. Jace stood firm, refusing to show fear. He said he had nothing valuable. But one raider noticed a small blanket on a chair, the same one Rin used during the day. He smirked darkly and shouted that the alien woman they were hunting must be here. Inside the hidden room, Lyra covered her child's mouth with her hand, trying to silence every breath. Rin trembled silently in her arms. Lyra's heart pounded so fast she thought it would break. She could hear the raiders' voices clearly through the wall. She knew what they wanted. She knew they would destroy anything in their path. She whispered prayers, begging the universe to keep her child safe. Jace stepped forward, blocking the raider who moved toward the storage area. The raider raised a weapon toward him. Without hesitation, Jace activated his electric tool. A sudden burst of blue energy struck the raider's chest, making him drop to the floor with a painful shout. The other two raiders attacked immediately. One swung a heavy metal rod at Jace. He dodged, barely missing the blow, and grabbed another tool to fight back. Sparks flew as metal clashed against metal. Jace wasn't a trained fighter. His arms shook from the impact. His breathing grew fast, but he fought with everything inside him. Fear, courage, anger, and a desperate need to keep Lyra and her child safe. One raider grabbed Jace by the collar and slammed him against the wall. Jace gasped but managed to shove an electrified tool into the raider's shoulder. The raider fell back with a growl. The third raider ran toward the hidden wall, noticing the disturbance in the shelves. He shouted that the alien was here and raised his weapon to shoot. Lyra felt the panic explode inside her. She couldn't wait anymore. She couldn't let the raider find them. She burst out of the hidden room, placing herself between the raider and her child. She held her arms out, shielding Rin. She didn't care what happened to her. She only cared about protecting her innocent child. The raider grabbed her arm roughly, but before he could do anything else, Jace tackled him from behind with every bit of strength he had left. The raider crashed into a shelf, sending tools flying everywhere. Jace fought with pure determination, ignoring the pain in his arms and ribs. He didn't let the raider reach Lyra. He didn't let fear stop him. At that moment, the outpost guards arrived. They burst through the open door, weapons ready. When the raiders saw reinforcement, they tried to escape. One guard shot a stun beam that hit a raider in the leg. Another raider was tackled by two guards. The last one ran straight out into the street where more officers waited. Jace collapsed to his knees, breathing heavily. The danger was finally gone. Lyra rushed to him, still holding Rin close. She knelt beside him and touched his shoulder. Her hands shook, but not from fear this time, from relief. She thanked him over and over, her voice breaking. She told him he had saved their lives. Jace smiled weakly and said he just did what anyone should do. But Lyra knew the truth. Not everyone would risk their life for someone they barely knew. The guards asked questions. They saw the raider symbols and listened to Jace describe what happened. They realized Lyra and Rin were the targets. The outpost leader made a decision immediately. Lyra and her child were placed under official human protection. That meant no one could harm them. No one could chase them. No one could insult them again without facing punishment. The outpost would protect them fully. Days passed, and the atmosphere changed completely. People who once whispered about Lyra now brought small gifts for Rin: warm clothes, simple toys, sweet fruits. Some apologized to Jace for doubting him. Lyra was shocked by the change, but Jace explained life simply. Sometimes people hate what they don't understand, but when they see truth with their own eyes, they learn. Lyra slowly allowed herself to believe she had found a true home. She decorated her small sleeping area with drawings Rin made and little items Jace collected for them. Every day she helped Jace with more confidence. Every night she put Rin to sleep without fear of raiders or cold winds. Jace felt his heart grow lighter each time he saw them. He didn't think much about it. He just knew the workshop felt warmer now. He knew laughter belonged there. He knew he liked having them close. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Lyra stood at the doorway watching the sky turn orange. Jace stood beside her quietly. Rin played with a small tool on the floor. The air was calm. Lyra looked at Jace with soft eyes and whispered that she was grateful not only for shelter or safety, but for the person he was. Jace looked surprised for a moment, then smiled gently. He told her she didn't owe him anything. She shook her head and said she owed him everything. For the first time, She felt the world give her something she thought she lost forever. A real home, a safe life, and someone who cared. And for Jace, he finally understood something simple but powerful. Helping her didn't just save her life. It saved his too.